about redefining their legacy to reshape the narrative that had held them captive for too long. With a firm sense of intention, Susan considered the dual themes of convergence and courage, the convergence of their paths and the courage required to face what lay ahead. As the clock ticked toward their meeting time, Susan felt a mix of hope and fear. Would they stand together against the backdrop of tradition and push for change, or would the expectations of others suffocate the budding strength they had uncovered? Thus, in the quiet corners of the kitchen, fueled by newfound resolve and the uncertainty of what was coming, Susan was ready to forge ahead. The moment to explore new beginnings had arrived, and she was no longer just a mother in conflict. She was a woman on the brink of realizing her potential. But still lurking in the shadows was the question that gnawed at her. Would she be able to protect Emily from the fallout of that confrontation, and in doing so, protect her own heart from the potential repercussions? The answer awaited them both just around the corner. Susan arrived at the clinic space with a resolute heart and a swirling mind. The modest room, filled with the scent of fresh paint, felt like a blank canvas waiting for vibrant strokes of ambition. Sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating the possibilities that swirled within her. For the first time, she was face to face with the physical manifestation of her dreams, and the gravity of the moment gripped her. She imagined the desks lined with warm, inviting materials, and the walls draped in art created by those who had come seeking solace. What would it take to transform this raw potential into a nurturing environment? Her thoughts raced as she began to pace the floor, mentally constructing the spaces that would eventually house anxious whispers and laughter that healed. The anxious heaviness that had accompanied the earlier thoughts about Emily's confrontation crawled back into her mind, competing for her attention. Would Emily have the strength to voice her needs? Would she be willing to confront the expectations that loomed like storm clouds over their lives? They both longed for change, but were tethered to fears of family fallout. Susan shook her head, trying to clear the flood of anxiety. She had to redirect that energy into something productive. Creating the clinic was not just about providing a space for others. It was about claiming her own narrative and stepping boldly into her authority. She needed to adhere to her mission statement, not just in writing, but in action. As uncertainty turned into purpose, she felt emboldened to abandon her reservations. Taking out her phone, she started drafting a list of priorities, clearly outlining what the clinic would need for an initial opening. Then, each item demanded consideration. What services would she provide first? Group therapy? Workshops? One-on-one counseling? The thought of building a schedule excited her. It was an undeniable affirmation of her plans taking shape. A chime interrupted her reverie. It was Emily's message confirming their meeting. A pulse of warmth radiated through her. This was the moment when they would align, not just as mother and daughter, but as partners challenging the status quo. Susan quickly responded, letting Emily know she was almost ready. As the time of their meeting approached, doubts slinked back. What if this journey strained their already fragile family dynamics? Would her ambition push Emily away rather than empower her? She closed her eyes for a moment and envisioned their discussions, the shared laughter, the resolute determination in Emily's eyes as they both fought against familial expectations. The door creaked open, and Emily stepped in, greeted by the sunlight spilling into the room. Her face mirrored a pot of boiling emotions. The tension was palpable. They exchanged a silent moment, a shared understanding of what was at stake. "Mom," Emily began, her voice steady yet edged with anxiety. "We need to talk about what's next." The words hung between them, weighted and potent. Susan nodded, feeling the looming storm of familial expectations enveloping them. Whatever they decided today wouldn't just affect them, it would ripple through their family, challenging years of unquestioned traditions. The gravity of their choice pressed down on her, yet within that weight was the thrill of potential change, one brave enough to rewrite their narrative, liberating both mother and daughter. Just as Susan opened her mouth to respond, Emily's phone buzzed against the wall, stealing their focus momentarily. It was a call from her husband, a chill running through Susan at the thought of him being pulled into this uncertain territory. Would he be an ally or a roadblock? With the decision at hand to uncover the truth, the question loomed larger. How would they navigate the family dynamics when confronted with the inevitable backlash? Their paths were about to collide with history, and only one thing was certain: change demanded courage, and they were both standing at the precipice of an uncharted future. Susan inhaled sharply, her heart racing as the reality of the moment enveloped her. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and a flicker of determination. Emily's phone continued to buzz rhythmically, an annoying reminder of the outside world that had intruded upon their shared moment. "Can you just—" Susan gestured toward Emily's phone, her voice taut. "I think we really need to focus on us right now." She felt her own vulnerability rising, a stark contrast to the growing sense of purpose she had felt moments ago. Emily reluctantly silenced the call and fixed her gaze on her mother, a mixture of frustration and vulnerability lingering within her pools of hazel eyes. "I just don't know how we can get past this. You know how my family feels about, well, everything," she said, her hands twisting nervously. Susan found herself grappling not only with her daughter's concerns, but with her own simmering fear. The risk of the alienation, the potential for betrayal and rejection clawed within her. "We can't control how they feel, Emily. What we can control is how we navigate this together." This was a defining moment, and every word they exchanged could either pull them closer together or further apart. "You deserve to speak your truth," she added softly. "That includes your feelings about your family trying to dictate what our relationship should look like. Let's determine that for ourselves." Emily's brow furrowed, her defenses rising instinctively. "But what if they don't approve? What if this makes everything worse? They'll think I'm siding with you over them." The statement hung in the air, heavy with the weight of familial loyalty, a tradition that threatened to suffocate their burgeoning individuality. Susan stepped closer, her resolve crystallizing as she realized the stakes involved. "It's not about sides, it's about finding our own voices. You don't have to choose between us. This is your life, and you have every right to define it on your own terms, just as I do." Emily sighed, the tension in the air palpable. Susan could see the internal struggle, the flickering light of realization battling against entrenched expectations. This was not merely about her daughter confronting her family. It was about Emily claiming autonomy. "What if I can't?" Emily whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "What if my fears are valid?" "Then we'll figure it out together. Fear can be a guide, but it shouldn't dictate your path," Susan replied, her voice steady. "Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's pushing through despite it." As they stood together, a fragile thread formed, weaving intentions and aspirations. The atmosphere shifted subtly, responsiveness replacing apprehension. Emily looked at her mother, the storm inside her giving way to a small bolt of courage. "Maybe I can talk to them, set some boundaries." "There you go," Susan encouraged, sensing the shift. "Boundaries are essential. We must establish them, not just for ourselves, but for those we love, too. Your voice matters, and it's time everyone knows it." Suddenly, a flash of doubt crossed Emily's face. "But what if they don't respect those boundaries?" "We will deal with that if it happens," Susan responded, the words firm and unwavering. "We can't let fear dictate how we move forward. This clinic, our partnership, it's about more than just healing others. It's about healing ourselves first." Emily nodded, slowly processing her mother's insight. There was an undeniable weight shifting, a duality of tension and determination coalescing into a newfound clarity. As they leaned into their conversation, Susan now wondered about her own resolve. The clinic could emulate something more than a professional undertaking, It represented a sanctuary for both her family's healing and her own. But with this revelation came another question. Could she be the catalyst for transformation within her family while facing potential backlash? And just as a fresh wave of uncertainty washed over her, a realization hit hard. They couldn't surmount their familial obstacles without preparing for confrontation. The time had come to face the very expectations that had bound her for years. Would anyone support her ambitions, or would the anxious voices betray her journey? With the weight of their aspirations pressing on both of them, their project felt like a high-stakes game. Susan took a deep breath, ready to embrace the challenges ahead, determined to become the architect of her destiny. The journey forward promised no guarantees, only revelations. But what lay in the shadows of their family dynamics still awaited discovery. Susan sat on the edge of her chair, feeling the weight of the conversation still pressing down on her. A part of her was exhilarated at the prospect of transformation, while another was gripped by uncertainty. Standing at the brink of a new beginning, she had to summon the courage to step away from her past. The clinic was not just a venture, it was a crossroads for her life, reflecting the personal battles she hadn't yet fought. Her fingers tapped rhythmically against the metal of the chair as she stared at the notes outlining their project. They had pinned their hopes on this clinic, a sanctuary where healing and acceptance could coexist. But Susan was also painfully aware that true healing required acknowledgement of the wounds she had been nursing for far too long. She needed to confront her own family dynamics, which had always dictated her place in the world. What if I fail, she thought, a whisper of doubt echoing in her mind. The anticipated confrontation with her family loomed larger as she mapped out plans for the clinic. It was time to unearth the boundaries she wanted to set, not only for Emily, but for herself as well. Setting boundaries, she murmured to herself, the phrase rolling off her tongue. Establishing them was necessary. It wasn't enough to merely survive. She needed to thrive. But first, there were conversations that needed to be had, and truths that had long been silenced. The thought of facing her family, their disappointing stares and pointed remarks pushed her heart into her throat. As if sensing her turmoil, Emily interrupted her thoughts. "Mom, I want to plan a meeting with my family. I need to be brave, but it's hard." The tremor in her voice mirrored Susan's growing anxiety. They were both embarking on a daunting yet transformative journey, each wrestling with their fears and expectations. Susan turned to her daughter and nodded, the weight of their shared experience bringing them back together. "Then we'll do this together. Prepare what you want to say, what boundaries you're willing to draw. I'll do the same with my family." In that moment, Susan recognized something powerful within. She was not just going to be a supportive mother, but also a powerful advocate for herself. It was time for her family to understand that her choices were not a betrayal, but a voyage towards something greater. Days turned into a blur of preparation. Susan found herself standing before the mirror each morning, practicing her words, anticipating potential reactions. She visualized the meeting with her family, so rigid in their traditional views, their reluctance to embrace change evident in her mind's eye. Yet she also saw the relief she hoped to inspire in them. The evening before the meeting, Susan found herself pacing, needing the cathartic release of movement. What had begun as preparing for another family confrontation had morphed into a personal reckoning. She was no longer the timid daughter, caged by expectations. Instead, she was a woman on the precipice of something deeper, a rediscovery of her own identity, devoid of familial dictates. "What if they reject me?" she thought, the question echoing ominously. Yet she knew rejection could not shackle her anymore. Boundaries were not walls, they were bridges to authenticity. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind spun in possibilities. each scenario filled with vibrant hues of conflict, clarity, and growth. But when morning came, it brought a tension that merged excitement with dread. Susan felt an unsettling rumble in her gut as she prepared. She was not just committing to a conversation, she was reshaping her narrative. Fear loomed on one side, while a tether of hope pulled on the other. As she headed for the door, her heart raced. Would her family view this new version of her as a traitor, or finally understand the depth of her love? The stakes grew higher with every step. The moment of truth had arrived. Little did she know that a sudden phone call would abruptly change everything, leaving a shadow of doubt over the path she was about to tread. Who would it be, and how would it alter the course of her long-desired confrontation? Susan blinked at the screen, her heart racing as she stared at the message. Emily's tone had shifted. The usual warmth was now laced with anxiety. The words hung in the air like a noose. "Mom, my mother-in-law doesn't want you this Christmas." Just hours before their family meeting was to take place, the news struck her with an abruptness that sent her spiraling. "What's going on?" she whispered, not truly expecting an answer, as a tidal wave of emotions crashed over her. This felt like a betrayal, a new layer of disapproval from the very person she hoped would understand her transformation. It was as if the hope she had nurtured for a breakthrough was now wilting under the harsh light of reality. She typed a response, hesitating between words heavy with urgency and others fraught with confusion. "What do you mean?" Emily's quick response flickered on the screen. "I don't know, Mom. She just doesn't like the idea of you being part of the family so soon." The words were a bitter pill, sharp and confirming all the doubts Susan had felt simmering beneath the surface. Was she still seen as the outsider, the flawed daughter-in-law who had never quite found her footing? The clinic, her fight, boundaries, and her declared independence suddenly seemed like a lighthouse swallowed by a storm. Thoughts coalesced in her mind, but none of them bore the calm reason she'd hoped to cultivate. What if her family continued to reject her? She felt her carefully constructed plan for the meeting unravel, replaced by the sharp pang of fear. Would rejection linger, tainting every family gathering? How could she maintain the resolve to advocate for herself while facing this new opposition? Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself, knowing that her journey was not only about facing her family, but also about reaffirming her worth. "I'll make this work," she thought, clenching her fists to ward off the anxious impulse to retreat. "Emily," she typed, "let's address this together. If we both confront the issue, we can stand stronger." The strength of their unity could pave the way for understanding and acceptance, but only if they leaned on each other. Her daughter's reply brought a flicker of hope. "Okay, I'll talk to her. You do the same with your family. Maybe they'll understand. We're better together." Susan felt the pulse of adrenaline surge through her. Was this the moment when Emily would rise to her own challenge? In recent weeks, she had nurtured her daughter's emerging voice. It was thrilling to witness the growth. Susan felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride in Emily's bravery, yet fear that the confrontation could dig deep into old wounds, exposing everything they dared not confront. The hours dragged as Susan shifted between preparing for her family and crafting a plan to instill confidence in Emily. Deep down, she realized that this confrontation was just as much about teaching her daughter to establish her own boundaries as it was about restructuring her family dynamics. The weight in her chest transformed from a dull ache into a heated resolve. She couldn't allow someone else's discomfort with her choices to dictate her worth. "Enough of this," she mumbled while gathering her thoughts, standing before the mirror once again. This time, the resolve was palpable. "I am not just a mother, a daughter-in-law. I am a person who has every right to own my narrative." As she prepared to leave for the meeting, she suddenly realized that those unkind words from her daughter's mother-in-law were a challenge, not a decree. Her heart pounded with clarity. This wasn't just about Emily standing in the family. It was a call to arms for Susan herself. Yet, right as she reached for her coat, another notification buzzed on her phone. This time, it was a video call request, an unexpected face from her past wishing for a candid conversation. A name she hadn't heard in years, a former colleague, someone who had known her in a time when she thrived, just before the weight of family expectations clamped down on her like a vice. Would this rekindling point her back toward the woman she had once been? Or would it add another layer of complexity to her already chaotic life? The answer to that question lingered in the air, thick with potential and anxiety, as Susan's heart raced toward yet another unforeseen confrontation. Susan stared at her phone, her pulse quickening as the familiar face of Kate, the former colleague and friend, filled the screen. A swirl of emotions tugged at her, nostalgia for the days when she had confidence and clarity. The time before her identity had become tangled in someone else's expectations. She took a moment to center herself before answering. "Hi, Kate," she said, forcing a smile that belied her inner turmoil. "Hey, Susan, it's been so long. I saw your updates on social media and I thought I'd check in. How are you?" Kate's voice was warm, but Susan sensed an undercurrent of curiosity. Just then, the reality of her situation hit her like a tidal wave. How could she answer that question without revealing the chaos lurking beneath the surface? She wasn't just dealing with the impending meeting with her family, but now she was faced with an old friend who represented a time when life was simpler. Well, it's complicated," Susan replied, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm trying to navigate a challenging family situation. Care to share?" The soft prompt opened the floodgates. Despite herself, she began to peel back layers of her current struggles. The tensions with Emily's mother-in-law, her perpetual feeling of being an outsider, the desperate need to assert her independence without burning bridges. As she spoke, Susan gained momentum, her words gaining weight and urgency. "I feel as though I'm always fighting to show my worth. It's exhausting. It's like no matter what I do, I'm still seen as the failed daughter-in-law who can't seem to fit in." A pause followed, and Susan could almost hear Kate processing her words. "It sounds like you're standing at a crossroads," she finally observed, her tone reflective. "Are you going to reclaim your narrative or allow others to write your story?" The question struck a nerve. "I've fought too hard to get here," Susan admitted, her voice steadying. "But it's hard. There's this incessant voice in my head that tells me I don't belong." "Kill that voice," Kate urged, her tone shifting to one of encouragement. "You've always had a strong presence, Susan. You need to be brave." The simple reminder rooted itself in Susan's mind. She had put so much emphasis on external validation that she'd neglected to champion her own resolve. "Maybe I do need to reevaluate how I perceive myself, not through the lens of others, but as I'd like to be seen," she murmured, the gears in her mind turning anew. Kate's laughter broke through her thoughts. "There she is, the Susan I remember. You always had a way of inspiring me and those around you. You've got this. It's time to show them how strong you are." Susan felt a rush of renewed determination. Her insecurity had acted as a barrier, blocking the very— "You're right," she responded, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. "It's my life. I need to own it. The family meeting, I can approach it as a dialogue, not a confrontation." The conversation continued to flow, ideas being exchanged organically. Each shared memory lit the path forward, and Susan felt herself reclaiming an essence she thought had long slipped away. She envisioned her meeting with her family differently now, not as a battleground, but as an opportunity for dialogue, a chance to redefine relationships. As their conversation drew to a close, Susan thanked Kate in earnest, feeling the weight of support behind her decision. "You have no idea how much this means to me," she reflected, knowing that this connection reignited a sense of self she'd feared was lost. "Anytime, Susan, remember, you're not just a role within your family. You're a whole person. Go show them." Kate encouraged, before they said their goodbyes. As she hung up, Susan felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She made her way towards the meeting in a state of heightened clarity. The ground felt firmer beneath her feet now, and the storm of self-doubt subsided into an undercurrent of resolve. The meeting was coming. It was no longer just an impending confrontation. It was the evolution of herself waiting to be shared. But just as she pulled into the parking lot, a message flashed on her phone. The name attached to it was unexpected and filled with concerns of the past. The director of the clinic where she had initially carved her niche. A sudden pang of uncertainty welled up within her. Would this message pull her back into old patterns, or could it offer yet another chance to further her newfound assertiveness? The reality loomed ahead, thick with possibilities. Susan stared at the message, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The director, always a looming figure in her professional life, had sent a simple text. "Can we talk? Urgent." This single line bore the weight of old expectations, unfulfilled ambitions, and the feeling of inadequacy that had shadowed her for too long. She felt a knot form in her stomach. Should she respond immediately, or was this a moment to reflect on what she truly wanted? The clinic had been a space where she had once thrived, yet it had also reminded her of the pain of feeling overshadowed. A part of her wanted to ignore the message, to focus her energy on the family meeting ahead. But another part whispered that she couldn't simply turn her back on her professional life. With a deep breath, she opened her inbox and began to type. "Hi, I'm available to chat. What's going on?" It was a choice made with intention, assertive, direct, and without apology. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed send, the act feeling monumental. The response came quickly. "Great. Can you meet me tomorrow at the clinic? There's an opportunity I think you'd be perfect for." A flurry of thoughts rushed through her mind. An opportunity? It had been months since she had felt remotely close to that idea. Prior to her struggles with the family dynamic and her self-image, she had been known for her creativity in developing client outreach strategies. Yet that had been enveloped in the shadows of her current doubts. Could she really step back into that world? As she drove out of the parking lot, veins pulsing with anxiety, she weighed the implications. If she accepted, it could mean reopening a door she had carefully closed, but closing it again could risk her sense of self-worth further. The thought wrapped around her mind like a delicate chain, both a constraint and a lifeline. Later that evening, while preparing her notes for the family meeting, she found herself oscillating between excitement and fear. What would the opportunity at the clinic entail? Would it feel as freeing as it once did, or would it only highlight how much she had changed? Despite the mix of emotions swirling within her, she felt herself growing stronger with each passing moment. Kate's earlier words echoed in her mind. Reclaim your narrative. With this new chance ahead, could she apply the same principles to her career? She envisioned stepping into the clinic, exuding strength and confidence, focusing not on who she used to be, but on who she wanted to become. In the following hours, Susan created a plan, jotting down ideas for how she would approach the meeting at the clinic. Research into current trends, combining her innovative spirit with a newfound assertiveness. She envisioned herself pitching ideas that had lain dormant for too long. It was a subtle yet grounding shift in her mental framework, transforming old fears into a powerful vision of what could be. As she prepared, she felt the nerves return. She couldn't shake the voice of doubt, whispering for her to play it safe in both matters of family and professional life. Remembering Kate's encouragement, she clamped down on that voice with resolve. This was the moment for her to redefine both her family role and her professional standing. She was not just a daughter-in-law or a former employee. She was Susan, a woman capable of navigating her own destiny. Just as she was about to slip into bed, her mind buzzing with possibilities, a final text notification stopped her in her tracks. A reminder for the family meeting tomorrow. The pressure settled heavily on her chest again, but with it came the conviction of reclaiming her narrative, both personally and professionally. The conversation, uncertain and charged, lay ahead. She glanced at the clock. It was late. Rest was important, but sleep wouldn't come easily. The looming possibility of her past intersecting with her present felt electric. Turning off the light, she took a final breath, determined to confront the chaos and emerge stronger. Tonight she would dream of conquering both her family's doubts and her own. But as she closed her eyes, we need to talk. It's about Emily's mother. The weight of her family responsibilities pressed back in sharply, and with it came the question, how would she handle this curveball when all she wanted to do was blossom out of her cocoon? Susan woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose coursing through her veins. The messages from Kate and the unexpected ones from the clinic director had instigated a transformation inside her. Today was about reclaiming her narrative, both for herself and for Emily. As she prepared for the family meeting, she stood in front of the mirror, reminding herself of the strength she had cultivated in recent weeks. She practiced affirmations, visualizing her future as a courageous woman embracing her independence. "I am worthy," she whispered. "I will no longer let anyone else define my place in this world." Driving to the meeting, thoughts of the clinic opportunity swirled in her mind. She understood now that her journey was about more than just the clinic itself. It symbolized her need to rise above expectations and embrace authentic growth. The meeting felt charged with significance. It was a simultaneous confrontation of both family dynamics and professional aspirations. As she entered the living room where the meeting took place, tension crackled in the air. Emily stood beside her, a reflected image of determination mingled with trepidation. They exchanged a glance, silently affirming their shared commitment to voice their truths. When the family gathered, the atmosphere felt heavy, filled with unresolved tensions and assumptions. Susan took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but resonating with empowerment. "We need to talk about our family's expectations, especially regarding us." As she delved into her feelings, articulating the sense of exclusion she often felt, their rigid expressions began to soften gradually. She highlighted the importance of mutual respect and the necessity for boundaries. "I am proud of the woman I've become, and I want to contribute to our family, not just as Emily's mother, but as someone with dreams and aspirations of her own." Her words hung in the air, and she could almost see them settling into the minds of her family. The silence felt different now, charged with contemplation rather than judgment. She felt every heartbeat reverberate with her resolve. Finally, Emily spoke up, her voice filled with clarity. "Mom's right. I want to have an open relationship with my family, but it needs to include mutual respect. Your opinions matter, but they shouldn't dictate who I am or who my family can embrace." The power of the moment struck her, a convergence of courage and honesty between mother and daughter, a collective rejection of suffocating traditions. As each family member absorbed their words, Susan felt a flicker of what could be, a family united by support rather than division. In the days that followed, the discussions became a pivotal turning point for their relationships. Conversations gained new depth, and assumptions began to dissolve. Susan felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years, her words validated as crucial, her journey respected. As the family dynamics transformed, she also faced the opportunity at the clinic, fully embracing her vision for the future. She met with the clinic director, approaching the meeting with newfound confidence. "I'm ready for a role that allows me to innovate," she asserted. "I want to cultivate a space that embodies healing and understanding for everyone, especially for women facing challenges like I have." The director regarded her attentively, the glimmer of interest in his eyes affirming her faith in herself. This was more than a professional pathway. It was a mission she had long aspired toward. Through the merger of her professional dreams and family aspirations, Susan realized that she had conquered her internal conflicts. Boundaries were established, not only with her family, but also within her career. She was a respected figure in her field and unapologetically visible as a person deserving of love and affirmation. Weeks later, standing in the newly refurbished clinic, she took a moment to absorb her surroundings. This was a sanctuary filled with warmth and hope, emerging of her aspirations and her commitment to communal healing. Emily walked in, beaming with pride and excitement. Together, they surveyed the bright space, a shared narrative having unfolded before them, one filled with resilience, authenticity, and an unwavering bond. Susan felt enveloped by a deep sense of fulfillment, the intertwining paths of mother and daughter now echoing with understanding and strength. "Look at what we've built," Susan said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is our legacy." "Yes, Mom, and it's just the beginning," Emily replied, beaming with a warmth that surged through Susan's heart. In that triumphant moment, Susan felt her fears dissipating completely. The achingly familiar shadows of self-doubt and insecurity had been conquered by relentless new growth. She was not just a daughter or a nurse. She was Susan, a woman who had firmly claimed her space in the world, both personally and professionally. As she stepped forward into this promising new reality, she felt empowered and accomplished. The journey had redefined her identity, blurring the lines between family and career in a way that celebrated both. The future unfurled before her, brimming with potential, and as she walked into that light, she knew she was ready, not just for what lay ahead, but for all that she had become. Now, if you appreciated this emotional journey and want more stories of personal transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm that shares these important narratives. Comment with your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion and how you too can reclaim your narrative. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how powerful personal growth can be. Your support matters.